So I have this Tilly project here that needs a fretboard, and I thought this would be a good chance to show how that's done with some mostly basic, readily available tools. Okay, we'll get started. I always start by getting the raw blank, square blank, and establishing a straight edge on it, and that will be the reference edge for marking the nut position and all of the frets. So I just use a hand plane. You can use a leveling beam or a shooting board or like a router table or a handheld router and a straight edge. There's lots of different ways, but this is fine for me, and it doesn't take much. Okay, I'm going to check that with a ruler. Take you out of the tripod and see if it'll focus this close. Pretty straight enough. Doesn't have to be machinist straight, like 10 thousandths or anything like that, just not bent either. So there we go, that's fine. Recording. Yes. So the next step is to just mark out the shape you need. I recommend getting a template set. Makes things a lot faster. So I'm just going to decide where I want the fretboard to be within the blank. There's a weird knot thing right here, so I'm going to try and avoid that. I can. Yeah. Usually, if your wood is like perfect, you would just put it right down the center so you have a center line, which is great. And I think you can get away with that here. Something like that. And make your line all the way across. Start with. That looks pretty much centered. I'm gonna check it with some calipers to make sure it's, to the millimeter, half mil. Okay, the calipers are reading 34.74 from the reference edge to each line. They're slightly out of alignment with each other, but it's fine. Within 1/4 of a millimeter is pretty close enough for this project. There we go. Center line And we can put our fretboard blank template on. Line up the line on the template with the fretboard. Pretty easy. Oops. If your pencil doesn't break. Mark out your shape. So, in frame is the nut end of the fretboard, like so. And what I always do is get a ruler or calipers or something and mark another line, say about 6 mil. Yeah, that's good. 6 mils. That will give you enough room for your nut slot. If you're doing a fendery style like this one, typically the fretboard is cut and then the nut is slotted into the fretboard. But if you wanted to, you can just cut it along the nut line, I guess that's what you call it, and it'd be like a Gibson style. The nut would just butt up against the fretboard without sitting inside of the fretboard. That was a lot of words for something I'm sure you can visualize. Anyways, I'm doing a fendery style, so I'm gonna stick with having some leftover meat on the end for the nut to sit on. Couldn't find my ruler, so using a block of wood as a straight edge. Like so. It's gonna be fine. So if you can see, yes, you can see the pencil in the sunlight. You have the nut, the front of the nut, where the string launches out. And then you have the nut slot, and then the fretboard will taper down into the neck. So just to reiterate the same idea, I guess, the nut blank will sit there on the line, and be like that. So this line and this line is the same. So we have enough room, barely. I'm gonna have to shave this down quite a bit and blend the scoop into the fretboard quite a bit, which is normal. But yes, something like that. Okay, since this wood is pretty dark, I'm going to just, come on, work. Mark my lines a little better so I can see where to cut them. That's fine. So that is where, this is waist. Can you see? Sort of. And then the nut slot's right here. And then the edge of the nut where the fretboard meets is right there. So we're good to cut this off. going to take my ruler and just mark the line that we made off the template. If you can see it against the dark wood. Gonna work for me? Yeah, okay. This is why we make the flat edge to reference from. Get a square, and now you can square up all of your lines. So that's the nut line. Make sure that's straight. Make sure that's square and straight and everything. And last one down here. Not super as important as the other ones, but want to make it look good. And at this point, we either cut the fret slots all the way through and then cut off the waist, or mark the slots out, cut the waist off, then cut the fret slots. The latter I would do if I was going to bind the neck and something else. I don't feel like going through binding today, so I'm just going to cut right through the waist. And yes, it's more material to saw through manually, but it's a little bit safer, because if these edges blow out or chip or anything from the saw blade, you're just going to be cut off, and you don't risk getting a big chunk out of your fretboard edge, which is not fun. I know, because I've done it before. And I like this way a little bit better. Additional note about cutting the fret slots before I start. You could radius the whole board right now. You could radius the board after you cut the waist off. There's a lot of kind of different options to choose from, but my method is to cut the fret slots now while it's unradiused and square, because if you're sawing and the saw blade kind of skips out or jumps out on you accidentally and gouges the wood, it's going to be planed off. Whereas if you already have your nice radius done and sanded, and then your blade slips, well shoot, now you have to go back and sand your fretboard some more, and it's going to get uneven, and it's a big pain. So that's why I like this way. To make your life a lot easier, buy a fret ruler, marker, scale ruler, whatever you want to call it. One of these things, and just use that. I mean, you can try to calculate each fret on like a calculator and measure with calipers and everything. That's cool if you want to do that. But these are great. Just use one. So you need to stick it down to the fretboard. Don't try to hold it in place. That never works. It'll move and get wonky. So I put the tape just behind the center line on each end. Get it lined up so the tape is in the same spot. And just behind the marks on the ruler, can you see a little bit? Okay, something like that. Super glue, and you smash it down, making sure it stays on the center line. If the glue runs out and gets on the wood or on the metal, that's not awesome, but it's not the end of the world either. Let me frame you up here. I'm using the 25.5 inch scale side. Put the nut marker on the nut line on your fretboard. And keep the edge on the center line, lengths up. Right in the way, a little bit probably, it's fine. So this is a straight edge, and you lay it right on the center line. And then you're ready to mark out all the fret numbers. Woohoo! Oh well. Yep, I'm just checking all the little marks, making sure they're centered. Looks fine. Peel that up. We still rolling here? Yep. So, actually, I need to work over here. Yes. I like to work with the reference edge facing towards me so I can put my square like that instead of over the top. That's just me. But are you in the frame? Yes. So just I'm eyeballing the center of the mark that I made. I put the pencil on it where I think the center of the mark is. Move the ruler so it's on the pencil and then mark. Just a little technique tip. Pencil on the mark, move the ruler, touch the pencil. There you go, it's straight. Boop. You can make sound effects if you want. There we go. And then, after the pencil is done, I follow up the same lines with a knife. That gives me a definite point to start the saw blade in. That's just the nature of fretted instruments. But yeah, do what you can to make them as straight as possible when you cut them. So you can't see me. You still rolling here? Yeah. But I'm down in the floor looking across it with the sun from the window, helping me see the lines, making sure they're all fine, and they're fine. So we carry on with the knife. I'm gonna try to do this without slicing the tip of my thumb off like I did last year. Same idea. Put the knife on the line, move the ruler up, just drag it across. I know it's a weird camera angle from where I'm working. I don't have a lot of room. But same idea as the pencil. I'm gonna cut the camera off because it's a little bit redundant. And then pick up with cutting. Can we see? Yes, sort of. Okay. To cut them, I cut them by hand. Let me zoom out again. With this style of saw, it's a Japanese pull saw. The kerf is, well, the kerf is the name of the width of the blade. That's what you call the kerf. And the kerf is just slightly smaller than the tang of the fret wire that I use, which is, I use the Centum's, whatever the biggest one they make is. I forget the measurements. Like 3 mil by 1.5 mil roughly. And I know, because I've done this with this saw, that the length of the teeth, can you see, sort of? Let me show you. The length of the teeth along the edge is just about the depth I need for the tang. But here's a little brain teaser. Because it's not radiused yet, if I just cut right to the depth of the tang, when we radius it later, it's not going to be deep enough. So you have to overcompensate a bit. And what I've worked out to doing is just going about halfway through the fretboard. That's a very general, safe area. And if I need to later, after it's radiused, I'll just run the saw very carefully back through them a little bit if any of them are too shallow. And if they're too deep, sort of after you radius it, and you have like a big gap under the fret tang, making sure it's fully seated, you just gather up a little bit of dust and pack it in there with a little tiny dab of wood glue. You make a little paste, just poke it in there, sand it smooth after it dries. Don't use super glue. It's a huge pain and a huge mess. It's gross and it smells and it burns your eyes. Wood glue is a way to go for anything made of wood. Always use wood glue on wood. Anyways, I'll get to cutting. It's going to be hard to get a good camera position where you can see what I'm doing and not be in the way. So we're, yes, cutting. Okay. hopefully that kind of works. Let me turn the screen around here. Ooh, okay, yes. Hello. What I like to do is I take the knife and I find the cut mark I made and kind of smash it in the edge. Wiggle it around a bit. Maybe cut out a little piece like that, you know, on each side. Yeah, so that gives the blade something to start in. Just gonna go slow at first, making sure I'm staying in the knife line. And see, I'm gonna show you. We've already got a little chip on the side of the fretboard. Right there, I think. That's it, yes. That little chip from pulling the saw through, if we already shaped the fretboard, that would be a chip out of the side of the fretboard and you'd have to repair it. No fun. Okay. Try not to go on too many tangents. But I'll go roughly to where the center line is. Yeah, you can use a jig. I have a little jig, but I like this saw and it doesn't work with the jig. So I've just gotten used to doing it freehand. And don't use too much pressure. If you're really pushing on it, it's gonna wander off somewhere you don't want it to go. So I'm not really pushing down much. I'm just resting it in and pulling it across the line. And after it gets started, you just follow it through from each side. I'm doing this quite slowly so you can watch and follow. But after you get the muscle memory for it, it doesn't take that long. And this saw is getting kind of dull. I can feel it kind of grabbing up and binding. Okay. The straight line is established. So now give it some beans. And you can see when it's making full contact across the whole width, it does bind up a little bit. It's dull. Yeah. So I kind of work slowly on each end until it's deep enough. Is my hand in the way? A little bit. Basically like that. I might have to change my saw blade, sadly. But let me show you. Pull it through a few times. This time I am putting pressure on the tip. Because it's a pull saw, it cuts on the pull, which really aids you in keeping it straight much more than a push saw, like a Western saw. And I can see the slot is a pretty good depth. I'm looking at this side from the bottom of the teeth compared to where the fretboard is. Okay. Looks fine. Let me show you what I'm looking at from the side. Let me see here. Will you focus? Yes, a little bit. A little bit. Come on. Okay. You can see the depth, if it'll focus, is about halfway. Come on. Come on. It's about halfway there, which is good. That's where I'd stop. And if I can get the camera angle right, you can see across the entire cut is one equal depth. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. So I'll repeat that process across the whole fretboard. It does take a while the way I do it, but I like the safety, and I find the little jigs to be kind of really tedious to set up, and by the time I get the whole jig set up and everything, and I'll just have it cut already, so I do it this way. Okay, testing. At this point, all of the slots are cut. And right about now is when I would start the face dots, if I was gonna do that. Usually I skip them and just do the side dots, but for demonstration purposes, I'm going to show you what I would do for the face dots. Just the process. I'm not gonna actually install them because I don't have enough individual little dots to use on the whole fretboard. So let me get my flexible protractor and show that when I can find it. So there isn't really a huge difference in the process between marking out the dots now and marking them out after it's radiused, but I'll just go ahead and show this. Let me get you repositioned. Oh, I have top down view. There we go. Okay. So, just using the 3rd fret, for example, what I do is I'm copying this from an Instagram video I saw. That's how I learned it. You go corner to corner from the cut. Mark a diagonal across the fret. And you do the same thing on the other side. You mark corner to corner, make an X shape basically. And that guides you pretty much to the middle. And the center line should meet up right in the middle of the X. And then that is where you drill for the dot. You do that all the way along. For the 12, where's the 12? 3, 5, 7, 9, 12. 12 is right here. For the 12, what you can do, so the center line, it's hard to see from my angle, it's right there. You just go the center line to the corner. Because there are 2 dots, you just divide it in half. And there aren't really any rules. You know, you could have them offset to just one side of the board, however you want, but if you're doing, you know, typical dots down the center line, 2 on the 12, this is how I do it. Center line to the corner. Again, so you have 2 X's equal distance apart. Like so. Let me see if that shows on the camera. Yeah, you can see that. Just corner to corner, stopping at the center line. You get the idea, right? And then you just drill right on the center of the X for your dots. So typically on the fender styles, you have a skinnier 1/8 inch nut. 1/8 inch is like 3 mils. 3 mil / 8 inch nut. And you just use a little router bit and take off a little slice like you see on all the fenders, and the nut sits down in the fretboard. But I don't have any good quality small blanks like that. And I feel it's very wasteful to cut a big piece like this down to that dimension when I could just use most of this anyway. You can use the big wider 1/4 inch nuts on the fender style if you're building it, you know, for yourself, custom, or for a client. There's really no difference, unless you just want to be traditional. But I'm going to use this, which means I need to clear out this channel, and that has to be completely straight. And I always go about, see if you can still see this, halfway through the fretboard, or a little more even. And this is waste, of course, I've said that before. So you just get a little shelf, boop, boop, and then at the end of the fretboard. And they'll sit, you know, about like that. If you really wanted to, you could just cut it off, like a Gibson type, and it'd be like that. But there's really not much difference, mainly just looks. That's the biggest difference. Functionally, no difference, really. Just do what you want. So I showed this before. This is the neck for the project. And because I put the channel straight through without little bridge right here of wood left over, having the nut just sit right on the neck, I mean, it's fine. Functionally fine, structurally fine, but I don't know, I just like to have that little piece covered by the fretboard a little bit. So I'm gonna route this channel away between these two lines. Can you still see? No, between these two lines, right there. Oop, take that out. Really quick with a router, 30 seconds. This is how I set up the router. So, very simple. Don't overthink it. You put the edge, the cutting edge of the bit, right on the line for the nut, and then you come over here with a straight edge and you draw a little pencil line right there, and then you tape down a little piece as a straight edge like this piece. Like that. You tape that down and your router follows it. Easy peasy. Okay, the slot or shelf ledge is done, and at this point it's ready to trim off all of the excess material. So to do that, there are a number of ways. You could start with, say if you wanted to do it on a router, you could just place your straight edge, however much, 1/16 couple mils away from the edge of the wood, and progressively work back in a couple passes until you meet up with the line. You can use a hand saw and put it in your vise and saw down, which I've done, and it works fine. It's a lot of sawing though, but it does work. Built 2 whole guitars that way when I first started. The little bandsaw is ideal. You don't need like a 14-inch, which is what I'm going to use. That's way overkill for this job, but it's what I have. So those little like 10-inch ones you can find, those work fine for most guitar building applications. The 10-inch bandsaw is fine, unless you want to get into like heavy resawing, making your own tops, milling lumber, that sort of stuff. It's a little small. You could resaw like a 3-piece top, not a 2-piece top. Anyways, rambling. Gonna trim. Bandsaw time. So for the end of the fretboard, I left it on because I'm going to cut it with a handsaw. The handsaw cuts much smoother and cleaner than the bandsaw blade. And getting that end grain on hard rosewood or laurel, whatever you're using, getting that cleaned up and smooth is a lot of time you can save by making it smooth in the first place. So that's why. Oop. I mean, if you know how to use the handsaw, you don't really need to watch this part, but this is going to be like all-inclusive. So here we go. Okay, I'm going to take a measurement off the width here. I know it's going to be way oversized. 50. Oof, it's a lot of way to go. Let's see here. 60. So the taper works out. We knew that already. So I usually work mine down to 44 because when I'm using the orbital sander on the neck, across the whole back and side of the neck, it's going to be taken down a little bit on each side to its final size. I'm not going to work it to final size now, because it'll get too small later. So I put it on the neck and glue it, still slightly oversized, and then work it down a little at a time later when I'm shaping the neck. I think I mentioned that earlier, so that's what I usually do. If you have like your neck perfectly shaped already, which I don't, or you're gluing it on a a pre-made neck, let's say you're repairing the fretboard or putting a new fretboard on, then yeah, go ahead and shape it all the way down now if your neck is already done or pretty close. You can adjust the process to whatever works for your needs. There isn't one exact, awesome, perfect way to do everything, so that's just what I end up doing most of the time. The process of getting it shaved down to glue on is pretty straightforward. You can use a router and just clean it up on a router table, or put a straight edge on it and to guide the router freehand, or handheld I mean. You can use a leveling beam, sand it down if you're pretty close already. Lots of ways, I've done them all. I have landed on using the hand plane because it's clean and it's not loud and I don't have to wear a big mask. So, ow, splinter, here we go. There's a high spot here and here, so it's just riding along, shaving the high spots until it's all flat, and then you're just shaving it down to the dimension you want. I think my wound has opened back up. Band-Aid looks wet. And also, I'm not worried too much about the exact squareness of the edge. I mean, like that way. If it's tilted over to one side or the other, not a big deal because it's gonna be sanded down later. I just need the dimension to be pretty close. Okay, I'll work the other side and come back. So just a few shavings later, it's already down to 59 on the back end. Let me check the framing. Can't see what I'm shooting here. There we go. Yes. And 46 on the, 46.94, 47 effectively on this end. Where are you? There you are. So this end needs to taper down a little more. Not as much as this end though. I like the last fret to be around 58. Just for comfort. Final size. So that can stay. I need to kind of fade in the taper without touching the highest fret side, if that makes sense. So I have a mil to go here in total before I'm at the size that I'm happy gluing it on. So that was a lot of words for something I can probably show better. With the plane, I'm just starting a short shaving like that, And then with each pass, just starting a little further back. And I'm going to lessen the cut a bit. So a few there up front, then work it back. And then start over. I'll do the other side. Start with a few on the end. Okay, it's a really tough spot because of that knot, but I'm going to check it. .04. Repeat the same process, the same rough number of swipes, and we haven't touched this end at all back here. I don't know if that's in the shot. Let me check. A little bit. Get a better picture of this. Haven't touched this end. Only this end to about here. Okay. Same thing on the other side. Ow. Ow. That is super annoying. Okay. Then I'll check it again after my ears are ringing. Still looking, equal distance from the center line like it should be, within reason. Okay, 43 point, actually went a little too far, 43.61, which is a perfect final size, but it's not the end of the world. I'm just going to have to be a little bit more careful and not to sand this edge down too much when I'm shaping the neck. That's all. You adjust as you go. Really, that's a lot of what guitar building is. Do a little bit, you go, uh-oh, that's not right, and then you adjust it later. I'm going to check the fretboard against the template. Just kind of match it up with your fingers. And it's perfect, really. It's a little bit oversized compared to the template. For me, it's probably about perfect. Okay, side dots. Scary. What I usually do to start with is mark a line. Super technical, I know. Anyways, I use these, the same fret ruler thing, because I want the dot to be closer to the bottom of the fretboard, not right dead middle, dead center. across the width or thickness. And this works out to be just about right. So just set it up like that and mark a line on the places you want the fret dot to be. 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, 15, 17, 19, 21. Okay? And it's just going to give you a line to follow. So all of the dots are the same height or elevation. So they aren't, wavy. Even though sometimes mine are wavy anyway. There's only so much you can do with a hand drill and dull drill bits. So I'm just making the line all the way across and make sure they're on the right space. Yes, we're fine. Okay. You can't see, but I can see. You're zoomed kind of far out. So the line is about 2/3 down the thickness from the top of the fretboard, which is good because when we radius it over, it's going to be fine. You just don't want it to be too close to the top, so when you radius, you cut through the dot, which is not cool. I've done it. I think everyone has done it at some point. So that's that. How I do that, now we drill. Woohoo. So drilling, kind of complicated to set up in a way that is consistent. We have the lines. I don't know if you can see them in the camera, but they're there, the reference lines. So this is really, really, I don't know the word. If anybody has seen the movie Little Big Man, when he's learning to shoot and he does that like with his eyes, what do they call that? I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen the movie. That's what I do, kind of. Not really, but I get kind of low, or I hold it up. Either way. I just... not really. Okay, start over. I'm looking between the two cuts, and I place my pencil on the board, and I just I close my right eye because I'm left eye dominant, and I just go find the center, and it's about there, and you can see when it's not centered. Just erase it and do it again if it's not centered. That looks okay. But your eyes are pretty good at telling you. Yeah. Yeah, looks fine. Okay, keep going. And on the 12, I do measure, because we have two and we need them to be the same distance apart. I'll do that in a minute after I finish the other ones. So I'm kind of looking between the two lines and just finding the middle. It's a lot of words for something that's pretty simple. When you have your pencil there, you can see pretty easily when it's in the middle of the two lines. It's a little off. go. I hope that makes sense. And of course, if you want to, by all means, check it with calipers, with a ruler. That's just how I've gotten into the habit of doing it. And you can hold it up to the light and check. That looks fine. Looks fine, all fine. I don't know how much you can see in the camera, but last one here. So the lines I made form like an X pattern, like a cross pattern, and then you just drill where they meet. It'll be pretty close to centered, close enough nobody will be able to tell otherwise. I'm going to try to show you handheld what I mean. This is glaring way too much. So I kind of get to this level. Focus, dang it. And I look between the two saw lines. And then I place my mark where it looks centered. It's not going to focus this close, but if I back up and zoom in, yes. So you can almost see it. Anyways, it's not going to cooperate. I hope that made sense. I'm not going to show the whole thing because I'm short on battery here, but this is how I do the marks. I find the line and then I put my awl on it and I push it in. Super high tech. Next one. Loop in. Next one. Probably out of frame now, but that you get the idea. That just guides in the drill bit a little bit easier. So I had to let the battery charge and lost the good daylight. But we carry on with drilling the side dots. I have poked all the holes where I want them to be. And instead of trying to drill vertically from the top down with the hand drill, I think I prefer to go from the side. I start with a bit that's quite smaller than the actual size we need, and this one is actually broken, but see if it behaves. No, it's not going to behave. So onto the big one, bigger one. So just put it in, and I go pretty slow. That looks fine. I'm going to use my poker, my awl. I don't know why I started calling it a poker. And the little drill bit. So that goes right in. It doesn't move. It shouldn't move much. go. Like that. And so on. I'm supporting it with my thumb, kind of steering it. Okay. Next one. So for the inlay dots, I use these really basic plastic ones. Instead of getting the individual dots already cut, I just use these, and they're a little bit oversized for that drill bit I used. They're supposed to be 2 mil, but it doesn't matter specifically what the number is. I just have to make them fit, which is really easy. I will show you. I put it in the drill. Where's the drill? Drill. There we go. I put it in the drill, right? Then I just spin it in some sandpaper to make it the right size. Really simple. Okay, to put them in, you will be tempted to use super glue, but don't. This stuff is all you need. Super glue. I had one bad experience with super glue, and I was like, never again. What it did is the grains going, along the board, soaked it up, and it was a black super glue. So I had black streaks running across the wood where the wood grain had soaked it up like a sponge, and I scraped and scraped and scraped between the frets trying to get it out, and it was permanently stained with glue. Not fun. Let's get you back so I can work. Meow. Okay. A little dab. Put it in. Spin it around a little bit. I know, the lighting is pretty bad. Can't see much. And nip it off with some cutters. Much friendlier than super glue. And it doesn't burn your eyes like super glue does. Oh, that hurts. Ow. Oh no. Sometimes I do have to tap it in. Oh, it broke. Nice. That's all there is to it, really. I keep saying that, but don't overthink it. The glue is craft glue. It's not specifically wood glue. And it bonds to plastic fine for this application. It's not really structural. It's not structural at all. And when you spin it around in the sandpaper, it leaves a rough texture on it. So there's plenty of area for the glue to get into and grab. That's it, really. Playing those nibs off. Got a little piece of damage here where I drilled through, actually. I do that a lot, not a big deal, as long as it's not on the other side. That's a pain. But yes. On to the next task. Okay, just a hand plane like before. Run over those nibs. You could do it with a little chisel. That's also fine. But typically I use the plane. Until I get a really light shading in its flesh. There we go, that's all it needs. Pretty consistent. Yeah, it's fine. I just saw that. I missed one. These are the StewMac fret cutters. I use them to cut a lot of stuff. They're pretty decent. Kind of expensive though, like everything on that site. And there, that's all it needed. Okay, it's the next day, and left off just after drilling for the side dots, and it's ready to glue on at this point. So, pop that back in. I was matching it up earlier, and it's really close. I don't really need to use locating pins this time, so I'm gonna skip that. But I will show how I do it anyways. So what I do is I use like a toothpick, or you could use the same material, plastic, as your side dots, or little metal pins, whatever, doesn't matter. Just kind of eyeball halfway between the center line and the edge, let's say like right there, and I would just drill through a little bit, go down here to the other end somewhere like 15 maybe, same thing, drill in just a little bit. Then you have two matching holes, put something through, your toothpick, whatever, and then it won't slide around with the glue. Not that hard, pretty quick. But it's so close already. I don't really feel the need to do that. So, get the clamps and the glue out and start gluing. Something I forgot to mention about the locating pins. It's kind of obvious, or maybe not, I don't know. You're supposed to drill in through the fret slot, not the actual fretboard surface in the slot. So I marked a little pencil line right there on the edge of the neck that lines up with the line on this side of the neck, and that's where you put your nut slot to make sure your intonation is going to be in the right place. Before I clamp it, I like to do a little final check. I just hold it up to a light source, like the window over there, and I just go along looking to see if I can find any gaps, any low spots in the neck, saw marks or anything that might not have been smoothed out, but it's already pretty good. I did this earlier, just demonstrating right now. It's fine, we're fine. And the fretboards are kind of flexible and will form themselves to the shape of the neck. So if you have a bow in your neck as it is, and you clamp your fretboard down, all that pressure is going to form the fretboard into the neck. If you have a back bow, same thing. So try to make it as flat as possible, and if it's not completely flat, you have a little bit of room to work when you're radiusing. You can kind of focus on one end or the other or the middle to flatten the top of the fretboard, even though the neck might not be completely flat and straight. I see a lot of people asking in Facebook groups what glue to use, and I don't know why that's such a big question. Just use wood glue. It's fine. It's wood. Use wood glue. I've been using hide glue actually, because if there's any problem later, it's a little bit easier to release and fix. And this is more or less just for demonstration. I don't know if I'm gonna keep this fretboard on this neck, but here we go. I don't really worry about getting the glue on the truss rod. Especially hide glue, because, it doesn't really stick to metal the same way it sticks to the wood. It'll dry on the metal, but it doesn't glue the metal to anything super well, and it's just really not a big issue. But I try to keep it clean as much as possible. When you mash the fretboard in, it's going to spread all around and get down in the groove anyway, even if you do clear it out before you clamp it. That's fine. I use a silicone brush thingy, like one of these, and I just smear it around pretty well. You can use the hot hide glue, like in the little crock pot type jar thing, or fish glue, or you know, any type on basically. It's not supposed to be that complicated. I didn't really need it all the way down on this end, but it's fine. I can clean that off later. Okay. I rest it on and then give it a good smear. And that helps kind of activate the glue a little bit and work out any air that might be trapped. Creates like a vacuum when you get all the air out. Okay, I'm just flushing it up with my fingers. And looks fine. A little bit more. And I can feel it starting to tack up. Okay. I might regret not doing the locating pins, but man, it's fine. This is not like a super important project. There we go. I just put them on wherever they fit, really. Doesn't have to be too tight if your joint is good. Definitely not tight enough to dent the wood. It's just holding it in place. And the glue does the work. Still rolling? Yes. Very good. It's ready for the radius to go on. I cleaned up all the glue drips, which is pretty boring, and you don't need to watch that, so it's ready. To do that, I used the tape and glue to just stick it down across the table and plane it with a hand plane. If you don't have a hand plane, probably the best way is to use a router jig, either a homemade one or just buy one. They're like $100 US. They fit a variety of routers, and if you're into guitar building, you probably already have a router, and it's not that much more of an extra cost on top of everything else you need. So I would highly recommend that. I've heard nothing but really good things about them. I haven't tried one yet because I've had the hand plane, that's all I've used. But I'll tape this down and get to planing. Okay, planing, kind of a complicated thing. So just a lot of muscle memory and practice involved. Gonna trim this glue. Tape. Okay. I start by just taking off the corners and easing it over into a roundish shape, and check with the radius gauge, and then follow it up with the sanding block. In theory, because I'm on camera, it's probably gonna immediately chip and tear out and be horrible, so we'll just see what happens. I like a 16-inch radius, so I got my gauge, and it doesn't take much work to get down to 16. Let me make sure everything is framed pretty well. I'll take a few swipes and just see what happens. Got a little bit of a tear. Not a huge deal. You can tell my depth of cut is a little bit uneven, and it just caught too much. It's one of the things about planing, you just have to read what the wood is telling you. So if you're not comfortable with a plane, buy a router jig. Just do it. I can see I'm going against the grain direction because it's tearing out all along the wood. So as the blade is going across, it's lifting up the fibers, kind of like that, and just chipping them out all the way. So I'm going to turn the table around and go from the other direction. Same process, just feeling it out for now. maybe hear it as well. It's a smoother sound. It's not as raspy and sandpapery in the way it sounds going this direction. But it is cross-grained, which means some of the wood is going this direction, some of the wood is going that direction, and it's basically interlocked. And no matter which way you go, you're going to hit against the grain at some point. Like right here, it's very, wants to grab the blade and dig in, and I can feel it. While on this side, it's much smoother. I'm happy with that. That's all it needed. It is slightly flat in some spots, but I need to smooth it over with the radius block anyway, and that'll take care of the rest of it. Okay, in picture. A quick alternative to the sticky back sandpaper is just the tape and glue, which I use for everything. There you go. Just give that a second. And that's all you really need for this job. I use 120 because these rosewoods and ebonies and things we use are pretty hard, and it takes it down pretty quick without clogging too much. Are we in this? So there is a little bit of technique to the sanding block, because if you just go crazy with it, you're going to wear it down unevenly, which is not ideal. So I hold it with both hands and have kind of my thumbs in the middle and just guide it along with my fingers underneath. Okay, you can look at the paper to see where you're sanding. Like I'm taking most of the wood on the edges here. If I zoom in, you can see the sanding marks, and in the middle, no sanding marks. So it's gently taking down the corners until it's the one consistent radius. And if you get tired of it and you're like, this isn't going anywhere fast, I just want to put the frets in, that's fine too. As long as it's pretty smooth, you're going to go back over it with 220, 320, 400 if you want, and it'll all be smoothed over by then. So get it pretty close and it'll be fine. You can see, maybe, I still have some rough spots Usually, you can get most of it out with sanding. This fretboard is still pretty chonky, and I have a lot of room to go down. Even though the radius is fine, it's just really kind of too thick. Way thicker than it needs to be. So I might go back to the plane just to trim it down a little bit more. If you like it thicker, stick with what you have. I started with a 6mm thick fretboard. I don't know if I said that before. And the tighter your radius is, the slimmer it'll end up being anyway. So if you're doing like 9.5 or 12, the corners down here are going to be slimmer, more tapered than a 16 or 18, 20, whatever. So just from looking at it down low, it's really still too thick. So back to the plane for me. So I probably picked the worst piece of fretboard wood to show for this whole video. I said it would tear out and chip because of my camera, and it has. Pretty badly. So that is a lot of material to keep sanding off. You would get there eventually, but I don't want to mess with that. So I'm going to fill it with glue and sawdust. This stuff. Make a thick paste. I'm just going to do it right on the table. That's good. Can you see? No. There you go. Okay. Just combine all this together. Okay, and just readjust the angle again here. Kind of smear it on wherever it needs to go. It's basically improvised wood filler. That's all it is, but better. And I don't worry about leveling it off too soon because it needs to sit and dry for a while. I don't know, an hour. And really, that's all there is to filling up little chips. I did run out of sawdust, so I got some more over here on this side. And I have some in a little baggie I could use. Let me mix up a little bit more. Okay, keep going. It's not very glamorous. but it's pretty quick. And most of this will be sanded down again anyway. You won't really see the coloration from the glue that much. It'll just blend into the wood. Anywhere else? Yeah, all across here. And it might take me a couple times to get all of this filled, but it's still more efficient, I think, than trying to just sand away and make your fretboard smaller and smaller. So I'll let that do its thing and come back, see if there's anything else I need to fill later on. I had a little bit more down here where it just wasn't quite filled all the way, and I changed my strategy. Instead of just smearing it on there and leaving it pretty rough, I did end up scraping it back a little bit with a blade, but which I would recommend. Actually, I changed my mind. You just have to watch, because the blade will grab the glue as it starts to set and just lift it out of the little piece you're trying to fill. So if that happens, just pack it back in and level it the best you can. But I'll show you down here where you can see it in the light maybe a little better. No more tears. It's filled with the filler and sanded. You can see, like, right here, there's a big one. That's all glue and filler in there now, and it's sanded flush. Same thing will happen down there. It does kind of take a little bit to sand off. I went down to 60 grit paper, just kind of to grind it off, and used a blade and scraped the wood away, and it's fine. It still beats trying to sand the whole board all the way down to the bottom of those tears. It's a lot more sanding. You don't want to do that if you don't have to. And of course, if you use a router jig, you avoid all this. But it is what it is. It's not that much. The worst part is waiting for the glue to dry. That's my other project. Anyways, that took minutes to dry, and I'm just giving it the last little bit with 120. To smooth out any little razor marks I might have put in it. Was scraping a little bit down here. And no more tears. Yeah. Some still left down here. I'm not concerned about that because I'm gonna have to deepen some of the fret slots anyway and then keep smoothing it out. It's still pretty roughly sanded. 120 isn't really the smoothest finish yet. So it's basically ready for the next step. Actually, I'm gonna have to deepen all of the slots. You could have waited until this point to cut all your fret slots, which is completely fine. I just mentioned my preference earlier to cut them before its radius to avoid any damage from the saw blade. That's the biggest reason, but it's not a huge deal if you do put a little nick in it, because you have to get the fretboard smoothed out anyway before the frets are in. So, not a huge difference. But I'm going to go ahead and take this off the table and deepen those slots. I'm not going to show much, if any, because you saw me cut them earlier. So to deepen them, it might sound like a lot of work. I just put the little, I don't know, the edge of the blade in the slot and just pull it through. A couple times. I'm not really sawing, I'm not pushing down, I'm just dragging it through. I have a little piece of fret to help me check the depth, and it's fine. And you can get a fretting saw which has the little stop bar piece on it, so you set your depth and go like that, but the one I have isn't very sharp and the blade is kind of bent over a little bit and it's very sticky. It doesn't give a smooth cut, so I don't use it much. I like this one a little more. This one isn't very sharp either. And this also cleans out any dust, dry glue that may have gotten in the slot. So it's just a good thing to do in general, I think. Even though I was just cleaning the slot out, the blade slipped and made this gouge in the wood. So now I have to fix that. Which is why I try to avoid this if possible. Sometimes you don't know how much fretboard material you need to take off until you start and analyze it later, and you might end up having to deepen your slots like I did. It's not a big deal, except you need to address damage if it happens. And there's always going to be damage no matter what. Building a guitar completely damaged and repair free, impossible. It never happens. Every project has some sort of annoyance, I guess. Something you have to do, something to hide, but I'll see if I can get a little chisel in it. Not really. Here's what I'll do. it's too deep to scrape out with a razor, and if I sand down that much, I'm worried it will deform the fretboard too much. So and I know if I plane, this area is going to tear out again. So I don't like that option. The best thing I can think to do right now as I'm filming is to use the same glue and dust trick and just fill it back in a little bit. And hopefully there won't be too much of a visible line. Green picture here, yes. If you use super glue and put dust in it, it'll harden instantly and be useless. If you drip super glue down in the thing you want to fill and cover it in dust, I think it discolors too much. It'll get way too dark. But this way, it more closely matches the wood. It's still not perfect, but that's all it needs. And I will use the razor and just kind of smooth it back like cake batter a little bit. Not cake batter, frosting, icing on a cake. And then when that dries, sand it and it'll be level. It might be visible, but it'll be level and you won't feel it, which is the most important. Yeah. That's all it needed. It stinks. Unfortunate that it happened, but things will happen and you just deal with it, really. That glue sets so fast. There's so little on there, it's just soaked into the wood already. I'm gonna just actually some 60. Now test it with a chisel, see if it still has an impression. Yeah. A little bit more. I'll leave it longer this time. That wasn't long enough. scraped back, sanded a little bit, and with the fret on, it's going to cover most of that line. So now just on to sanding and then fretting. Fretting will be a separate video, so this is pretty much the end. We've built an entire fretboard and gone through the whole process. All that's left, just smoothing it out, really. Getting it comfy to play.